The bell over Armin's cleaners chimed as Eleanor Hale stepped inside, the bell's bright notes swallowed by the hiss of steam and the soft thunder of machines. She handed over a claim slip with her daughter-in-law's name, Chloe Hale, scribbled in looping ink. Armin himself slid the plastic-wrapped winter coat across the counter, then didn't let go. "Mrs. Hale," he whispered, eyes flicking toward the glass, where dusk made a mirror of the street. "Please listen to me. Take your grandchildren and leave town tonight. Don't go home." Eleanor felt the familiar absurdity of being scolded like a child. "That's a strange thing to say," she murmured, attempting a smile. Armin swallowed, then moved the coat just enough to reveal something taped to the inside of the plastic. A bank transfer receipt with Chloe's name, and a photograph of Sophia and Leo, her bright, freckled moon and sun, circled in red marker. The red bled a little into the glossy paper, like a wound. "Someone left this in the coat," he said. "I don't want trouble, but you need to go." A thin wind threaded the doorframe. Eleanor's hand steadied on the counter, because everything else in her seemed to sway. She thanked him in a voice that did not sound like hers, tucked the coat into her bag, and walked out to the curb where December was a cold mouth. Home was 20 minutes away and a lifetime too far. She cut the distance with the sharp edge of a decision. She texted her neighbor, Grace, "Can you sit for an hour?" and cabbed to the townhouse without looking back. Every streetlight a posed question. Inside, the children's backpacks lay open like two small, trusting hearts. She packed with the ruthless tenderness of a medic. Clothes, medicine, school files, birth certificates, the little shark-tooth necklace Leo loved, the hair ribbon Sophia called Sunset. "Adventure walk," she told them at 11:47 p.m., kneeling to tie sneakers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Hot chocolate promised. 1 marshmallow minimum." Leo scowled at the injustice of midnight. Sophia studied her grandmother's face and, reading fluently the fear there, took Leo's hand. Grace held the door while the taxi's hazard lights winked like nerves. The driver did not ask questions. Eleanor gave him cash and a destination. The bus station far across town where anonymity hummed like fluorescent lights. At the station, she bought 3 tickets with a new card she'd never used. She and Harold had saved it for emergencies, and she smiled without joy at the phrase, and chose a bus going anywhere that sounded unlikely, Charlton. The kids fell asleep on the sticky vinyl seats, their heads on her lap, and Eleanor held herself as still as a shoreline while her mind roared. She watched the coat's plastic wrap glint in the overhead light and thought, wildly, of the way Chloe had begun to vanish into her phone, the way money had begun to evaporate as if the air had a mouth. She thought of her son, Ben, on a rig in Colorado for a month of overtime, and how love could keep a person honest or make them blind. She thought, above all, of the red circle bleeding at the edges until it touched everything. The bus thudded into motion at 1:10 a.m. Eleanor closed her eyes and pretended the vibration was the hum of a lullaby. She would call in favors. She would trust the part of her that Harold had always trusted, the steel river under the soft voice. If there was a net tightening, she would find the hands drawing it. The city slid away behind them like a secret they could not keep. By late afternoon the next day, after a bus change and a coffee she didn't taste, Eleanor slipped back into the city the way a tide returns, quiet, inevitable, pulling everything loose with it. Grace watched the children in a motel miles from home, turning breakfast for dinner into magic. Eleanor kept the phone off and the coat zipped in a tote. Her townhouse street looked normal in the dangerous way of stage sets. She used the spare key under the brick and stepped into silence thick as breath on glass. Nothing broken. Nothing obvious. Wrongness blooming anyway. In the bedroom Chloe shared with Ben, Eleanor kneeled by the low dresser, the one that had eaten socks for years, and pressed the third drawer's false bottom until the would side. Beneath, an inset panel with a dial winked up at her. She thought of Chloe laughing at Ben's birthday, teasing him with numbers she called lucky. Eleanor's fingers spun the dial, stopping on 05-28-13, the children's birthdays braided. The safe opened as if bored. Inside, stacks of cash that smelled like 1,000 hands, 3 uncreased passports with wrong names and right faces, airline e-tickets printed early that morning, and 2 shrink-wrapped phones. Beneath those, a glossy photograph of Chloe with a man whose smile didn't touch his eyes. Julian Cortez, said the caption on the back in a hand Eleanor didn't know. A phone number, the name of a hotel. Harold's voice, the one she'd carried like a pocket knife since he died, said quietly, "You don't leave this. You lift it by the roots." She took photographs of everything, returned each piece to its grave, closed the house behind her, and drove a circuitous route to a federal building whose stone front promised a kind of sanctuary she had never hoped to need. An agent named Victoria Hayes brought her into a small room that smelled faintly of lemons and printers. A younger agent, Miller, spread Eleanor's photos across a gray table and went still. The photograph of Sophia and Leo, faces ringed in red, lay like a tiny emergency flare. "That mark," Miller said softly, "is sometimes used in child exploitation networks, an internal signifier for priority assets." The word assets fell like a brick. "We've been tracking Cortez for months. Your daughter-in-law's contact with him matters." "Chloe," Eleanor said, tasting the name for poison and coming up empty, only grief. "She's planning to run." "With them?" "With or to him," Hayes said, "is the question. Either way, you did the right thing coming to us." They wired Eleanor's living room that night. They listened as Chloe returned home at midnight and left again at 2. They traced a call to a prepaid phone. They mapped a radius around the hotel scribbled on the back of that photograph, and red dots bloomed on the agent's screen like a rash. Hayes outlined a plan that sounded like a heist movie read in a monotone. Stage an empty house, leak a false location for the kids through a controlled channel, watch the net tighten on the netters. "We'll protect your grandchildren," Hayes said, "but we'll need you to hold your nerve." Eleanor thought of buses and photographs and a red circle drawn with a steady hand. She nodded. "Just tell me where to be." Outside, rain began, fine, persistent, the kind that turns air into thread. Eleanor drove to Grace's motel and listened to the children breathe. She didn't sleep. She sharpened herself on the whetstone of what was coming. Clouds sat heavy over the city the next evening, the streets slick as sealskin. Eleanor buckled Sophia and Leo into Grace's car, kissed the crowns of their heads, and told stories about pirates who always found their way home. Then she slid into the back of an unmarked sedan, next to Hayes, whose jacket held the smell of rain and paper. "Alpha on Northeast," crackled a voice over Hayes's radio. "Bravo on the alley. Eyes on Hale door." Eleanor's house glowed with false life, lamps set on timers, a blue TV wash flickering against the drapes. Inside, microphones waited like patient insects. Across the street, a man in a courier cap leaned on a lamppost and pretended to scroll. At 8:07 p.m., Chloe arrived, shoulders hunched against the rain, a backpack slung low. She let herself in. Seconds later, her voice came through the sedan speaker, tight and quick. "Where are they?" she hissed. A pause. "No, I checked the motel." "She's not stupid." Another pause. "Julian, listen to me. If we don't move now, we lose the window." "Yes, I know the risk." Hayes scribbled timestamps. Eleanor pressed her palms to her knees until the bones in her hands felt like nails. When Chloe said the children's names, Eleanor flinched as if her skin had thinned. At 8:19, a second voice threaded through. Male, amused, with that flatness Eleanor had heard in Predators and in Debt Collectors. "Relax," the man, Cortez said. "The buyer's in from out of state. We make the exchange. You get your cut. You get your freedom." Freedom? Eleanor tasted blood in her mouth and realized she had bitten her lip without noticing. The front door moved again at 8:31. Courier from the lamppost walked past and spoke into his collar, 2 males approaching. "Southside. One in a cap, one with a limp." "Copy. Bravo. Rear." "Rear locked." "Alpha, stand by." Eleanor heard her own heartbeat over the radio's soft wind. She wondered absurdly whether she had turned off the kettle that morning, whether the hydrangeas out back needed trimming, whether love had a sound from far away. She thought of Ben in the cold, hands cracked by wind, believing his life was work and a home and 2 small bodies to lift up, unaware of the rot under the floorboards. In the house, Chloe's voice shivered. "Tell him to hurry." "We'll take the stairs," the man said. Hayes's hand came to rest, warm and impossible, on Eleanor's wrist. When we move, she said, we move. At 8:37, the radio said green. Doors opened without sound. The sedan breathed in. Breached, someone whispered, and then the street was full of bodies moving like ideas. Clean, practiced, inevitable. Eleanor did not see the takedowns, only the aftermath. Chloe on the porch, wrists bound, mascara blooming in 2 black flowers. A man with that wrong smile pressed to the walkway, rain needling his cheeks. Another in the alley swearing in a high voice. Hayes's people spoke in calm paragraphs. Eleanor's lungs remembered air. When Chloe's eyes found her, they burned with a hatred that said, "How dare you not be the fool I needed?" She wanted to ask why. She wanted to ask when. She wanted, ridiculously, to ask whether Chloe had ever loved Sophia's pictures of cats or Leo's dinosaur facts or Ben's habit of falling asleep with the TV too loud. Instead, she looked past Chloe to the shadowed living room, where a single lamp burned beside the couch. "Turn it off," she said to no one. "We don't live there anymore." Hayes nodded as if Eleanor had given an order. "Let's go get your family," she said. "Federal courtrooms do not care about your heart. They care about paper." Eleanor learned the choreography, the rising and sitting, the standing when names were called, and learned that a trail of receipts can become a knife. The government unfolded a map of money. Wire transfers from a Shell LLC to an account Chloe had opened 2 months after Ben left for Colorado. A text thread in which Julian promised a clean buyer, and Chloe sent photos she had no right to possess. A deposit of cash that glowed radioactive under the bank's fraud software. Agents testified about hotel lobbies and a code scrawled on a bar napkin. An advocate explained with terrible gentleness what the red ring on a child's photograph meant in certain circles. Eleanor did not meet Chloe's eyes. She looked instead at the stenographer's flying fingers and thought of how words become records and records become walls. The public defender called Eleanor to the stand. She told the truth carefully, like carrying a bowl of water across a crowded room. She said she had found the receipt and the photograph at the cleaners. She said she had opened a safe in her own house and recorded what she saw. She said she had called for help because help was bigger than her and because she could feel the cold breath of something that was not going to stop on its own. When they asked whether she hated Chloe, she said, "I hate what she chose." The room, for a second, felt like a place with weather. The guilty pleas came faster than Eleanor had expected. The man with the wrong smile had a record across 3 states. Chloe's plea included words like conspiracy and endangerment. Hearing them next to her family's name was like chewing glass. Sentencing dates were set. The news spun their faces into stories that strangers commented on between recipes and politics. Eleanor stopped reading after a single headline used the word grandmother like a weapon and a crown. When the first quiet Friday arrived and the court did not need her body for a chair, Eleanor signed a lease in Charlton where church bells arranged the mornings and live oaks drew lace against the sky. The kids learned the walking paths to their new school, found the best bakery for cinnamon rolls, and asked fewer questions at night. She did not feel brave. She felt functional, and sometimes that was how courage dressed. Each day she put breakfast on plates and braided Sophia's hair and listened to Leo's dinosaur facts, which had levels like a video game. "Velociraptor means swift thief," he told her, delighted. But it was only the size of a turkey. "Movies lie." "Some do," Eleanor said. "Some tell enough truth to help you run faster." The call from Ben came 3 weeks later. His voice sanded down to grain. "Mom, I'm coming back," he said. "I want to see them. If that's okay." The word turned like a coin in the air. Eleanor said, simply, "Come home." Ben Hale stepped off the bus thinner than he'd left, a duffel slung over one shoulder, a beard that looked older than his face. He saw the children first, the way most fathers see the world, and everything on him broke and mended at once. Sophia ran. Leo tripped over his own feet. Ben scooped both and stood swaying under the weight of what had almost been taken. That night Eleanor made chili the way Harold had taught her, setting the table for 4 and a place called Hope. The children talked in overlapping movies. When they were finally asleep, Ben sat across from his mother, his hands around an empty mug, as if it were a compass. "I had hints," he said. "Chloe started keeping different hours. Money vanished. She said I was controlling when I asked. I thought if I worked more, it would smooth. That's what men do, right? Throw more hours at a problem until it forgets to be a problem. There are problems that eat hours, Eleanor said. They get stronger. Ben nodded. I didn't want to see the teeth. He exhaled. I'm filing. For divorce. For full custody. I don't know how to be good at this, but I know I have to try. Eleanor felt the sensation she'd had on the bus that first night. Motion as a kind of safety. We'll build the good as we go, she said. Court again. Different paperwork. Family instead of federal. The judge listened to words like risk and best interest and issued an order that put the children under Ben's roof with Eleanor's hands holding up the corners. Chloe's rights became supervised visits she barely used. Then they were suspended. Weekends grew muscles. They went to the market. Sophia chose a comic book. Leo a balloon shaped like a hero. No one took pictures when the kids fell asleep in the back seat with mouths open to the kind of sleep you cannot fake. The house learned 3 forms of quiet. Homework quiet, reading aloud quiet, the exhausted quiet of people who made it through another day without the past dragging them by the hair. At night, Eleanor stood by the balcony while Ben read about astronauts and dragons, his voice finding the exact weight of wonder. She wrote in a slim notebook a ledger of the ordinary. Leo said broccoli looks like trees for small kings. Sophia tied her shoes without asking. Bells at 8. Harold would have said, keep the trivial. It is the fence around the sacred. She did. Spring in Charlton comes with a faint salt insistence, with azaleas so pink they look invented. On a Tuesday that felt like a forward step, Eleanor met Ben after work in the park. The kids scissored past on scooters, shouting rules they kept changing. I got a job, Ben said. Maintenance at the hospital. Benefits. Schedule that touches the light sometimes. He looked better, color back in his face, a steadiness not borrowed from sleep. I want to stay, he added. If that's all right. If you want this. Us. As a team. Eleanor considered the small fact that had become a cathedral. We are still here. Yes, she said. And it felt like opening a door with a key she hadn't known she kept. There were aftershocks, news articles that surfaced like unwelcome seals, paperwork that arrived with the authority of machines, a drawing Sophia brought home of a house with a red roof under which 4 stick figures held hands. That's us, she said. And that is the alarm system, she added solemnly, pointing at a square. The loud kind. Good, Eleanor said. Loud is fine. On the anniversary of the night bus, they went to the shore. They stood with their shoes off and let the Atlantic take the weight of everything for a minute. Leo pretended to be a raptor. Sophia collected shells like tiny arguments for beauty. Ben stared long at the horizon and then at them. I thought freedom was money, he said softly. Turns out it's sleep and cereal and knowing who's in your house. Also cinnamon rolls, Leo added, practical. Eleanor laughed, and the sound surprised her with its ease. She thought of Armin's thin warning, of a plastic bag with a red circle, of doors opening for men who spoke in codes. She thought of the way fear had taught her to move anyway. That night, after lights out and one last dinosaur fact in the hallway, swift thief, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table and wrote 5 sentences. We left before the sun. We came back with it. We told the truth until it became a wall between us and harm. We learned what quiet means. We are not hiding, we are home. She slipped the page into her notebook and closed it on the life they were building, which was not perfect, which was theirs. Outside, Bells counted the hour without asking permission. Eleanor poured tea and watched steam climb like a small and stubborn miracle. When the phone buzzed with an unknown number, she let it go dark. The past could ring all it wanted. She had hands full of present. And in the next room, 2 children slept under a roof that knew their names.